Society Matters.
Hello, this is Bernie Furshpan at HMTV. I'm your host of Raised by Survivors here at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. I have a very special guest. Today, she works at the Holocaust Memorial Tolerance Center. She runs a 2G a committee, and she's done a lot of great things and worked here for many years. And even more, she's done a lot of things for the Jewish community and survivor community. But we're going to find out exactly what her story is. I'd like to introduce Gail Kastenholz. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
And did you grow up in Long Island most of your life?
No, I grew up in Queens.
You grew up in Queens?
Well, I was actually Brooklyn at the beginning and then Queens.
Right. So almost everybody I talk to, they have a story about Brooklyn or Queens. And somehow you can't take that city out of you, right? Because we have a certain attitude coming from places like that, like Brooklyn or Queens. What part of Queens did you grow up in?
I was born in Coney Island.
Okay.
And I moved to Queens when I was 6. Forest Hills, Regal Park.
Do you remember living in Coney Island?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, you had fun?
It was very nice then.
Yeah.
I lived a block from the beach.
You lived a block from the beach, near the amusement park at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. I lived
23rd Street, I think their address was.
Right. I grew up in Marine Park. So
not that far.
And I worked at Coney Island Hospital as a volunteer.
Oh.
And so I'm very familiar with that neighborhood. Let me tell you, we used to hang out at Nathan's all the time.
But we moved when I was 6.
Yeah. And where did you move to?
Regal Park.
Regal Park.
Austin Street.
Oh, yes. Oh, great restaurants there.
63rd Drive in Austin Street.
That's,
it was very nice. It
was.
An apartment.
Yeah. A Jewish community, I would say, for the most part. Forest Hills, Kew Gardens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And your parents, they both worked or just your dad?
I'm sorry, were they both survivors?
Yeah, but did they both work?
Yes.
They both worked,
They both worked. My mother went back to school. She became a teacher of a Hebrew school. She taught in a yeshiva, which I went to.
Okay.
So you got a degree. She actually went to JTS.
Oh, that's nice.
And my father was an accountant.
So they're both survivors.
Yes.
They're both survivors.
They're both survivors.
And did they lose any family members?
Oh,
they
lots
did.
and lots.
Yeah.
And my sister was born in a displaced persons camp.
Uh-huh. And which camp was that? Do you remember?
It's Eschwege, northern Germany. It wasn't open that long. They came here in 47. My parents came here in 1947.
Right.
They had a rich relative. My mother had a rich relative in Brooklyn.
Yeah, my dad was in a DP camp in Munich.
Oh, this was near Berlin.
It was near Berlin.
And my father started the first Jewish day school for children after the Holocaust.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was principal of the school. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot of education in your family.
Oh, yeah.
Both your parents. And you as well, right?
I was an administrator for special ed and a speech therapist.
Over here in Long Island?
No, always in the city.
Always in the city? Wow.
Never on Long Island.
When did you...
and my daughter also teaches in the city.
Right. So how much of your life would you say that you spent out here in Long Island?
I lived on Long Island, but I worked in the city.
I see. So you commuted.
Brooklyn, Manhattan, everywhere.
And you raised kids here?
I'm sorry?
You raised your kids?
I raised my kids in Long Island, in Plainview.
In Plainview. Okay. So, and they're native Long Islanders, your kids.
Yeah, but neither one of them lives in Long Island.
So let me ask you, how much do they know about your parents' story?
As much as I know, which is not everything. They thought my father was the greatest person on earth, I have to say.
That's nice.
He was the most influential person in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my mom died when I was 23, so my kids never really knew her. Mm-hmm. So they only knew my father. So
I see. And they were close to your dad.
Yeah, they were.
That's nice.
They were.
Yeah. They miss him, I'm sure.
They were close to him.
Yeah. And so they don't live in Long Island anymore?
No, my daughter lives in Queens and my son lives in Pennsylvania.
I see. Okay. All right.
Near Philadelphia.
Yeah. What do you remember growing up with your parents? Did they ever talk about the Holocaust when you were younger?
Well, I grew up with mostly Holocaust survivors that my parents were friends with.
Right.
Mostly. And the neighborhood, Rego Park, had a lot of Holocaust survivors and a lot of people like that. And the Jewish school also, most of the people that went there had some Holocaust-related family members. Right. So it was always part of my life, and they talked Polish amongst themselves, but they spoke English to me. My father spoke 7 languages, and my mother spoke several languages.
7 languages? I never heard of anybody speaking 7 languages.
A lot of them did.
I knew that my parents spoke 4 languages.
Oh no, my father spoke like a lot of languages.
That's amazing. Do you? So when did they start talking to you about?
They really didn't talk
much
to me much.
Okay.
Well, my mother died when I told you when I was 23.
23. Yeah.
And there were no books. There were no movies. There was none of that in 1973 or 74.
Yeah.
It didn't happen until the 80s.
That's right.
So there was really none of that.
And I agree with you, because my parents didn't talk about it either.
Well, they talked about some of their life before, like their siblings and stuff like that. But they didn't talk a lot about what happened to them during the Holocaust. So I only know certain things about them, how they survived, things like that.
You know, I remember growing up in Brooklyn, and they didn't teach about the Holocaust in not the 7th grade, not the 8th grade, like we have students coming through here that they knew about it. But I do remember watching films of the Holocaust, and they would just sit there and sob. And that's how I kind of learned about the Holocaust, just watching their reaction to it. Well,
because education used to be watching dead bodies and skinny, emaciated people. Yes. That's not Holocaust education now.
Not today. No.
Not today.
No.
Not at all. They're going away from all of that.
Right.
You know. So.
And why is that? Why do you think
changed.
that? Why do you think that is?
I think. You know, I teach. I wrote a creative class for my temple.
Right.
And one of the teachers said, "Wow. When we went to school, all we saw was dead bodies, and we didn't want to learn anymore. Yeah. Now they teach more about the beautiful life before and what happened.
Put it in the proper context.
In the proper context.
I see. That's good.
In the proper context.
And I think a lot of people don't want to traumatize the children with these traumatic
Yeah, I mean,
images.
I think, you know, the kids watch plenty of movies and things.
They do. They see a lot of violence, don't they?
A lot of violence.
They really do.
Right. But that violence is make-believe, sort of.
Right. And this is real.
This is real. Right.
And it's scary.
Yeah, but you have to have a certain amount because you have to have reality in it. So, but they're going.
And I agree with that. You have to have a certain.
But it is it's changing over time. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this for like 45 years.
You've been doing it for 45 years.
What
motivated you to do it?
But
what motivated you to do it? How did it all start? When did you realize that this is something you should do?
Well, growing up, I had a pretty good life. My parents had a lot of friends. I don't know if my parents played cards.
My parents played cards.
Yeah, the Polish people played a lot of cards, right? Yeah. And they had a lot of friends, both American, but mostly Holocaust survivors. Mm-hmm. And they would talk amongst themselves all the time. But that was mostly our social life. I had no grandparents.
Right.
I don't know if I didn't have any. Then I moved to Plainview. And I had a friend, and one day I told her I was a child of survivors, and she said, "That's funny, you don't look like one."
Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
I don't know. I said to her, "Well, what does that mean?"
Right.
She didn't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
But
there's a certain look.
That changed me in many ways. It was right around the time that I was thinking about getting involved, and my kids were little, and I was wondering what she meant by that.
Right.
You know?
Okay. And how did you get involved? What was the first thing you did?
The very first thing we did was at the Mid-Island JCC.
Okay.
We started a group, 2Gs. Mm-hmm. And actually it was more like we had a psychologist involved with it at the beginning. And I was the president at some point. And I traveled the country meeting other children of survivors. I traveled to Cleveland, I traveled to Detroit, California, and it was so interesting because all the survivors were exactly the same no matter where you went.
Yeah.
And the kids were like where they lived. And a bunch of us traveled across many places in the country. It was great. We were young. We would sing Yiddish in restaurants. I mean, it was great.
But you felt this camaraderie with the other 2Gs.
Absolutely. So we started the 2G group at the Mid-Island Y, and then we started to hold programs, educate the community. We went into schools. There were no museums. The only museum was Yad Vashem.
Right.
Washington wasn't open. Jewish Heritage Museum wasn't open. This museum wasn't open.
Right.
There were no museums.
Right.
So we sort of did it on our own. Wow. Actually, there was one on the South Shore. There was one on the North Shore.
Maybe it's the second generation, right? The 2Gs that actually stimulated the opening up of these stories, of opening up of survivors to tell their stories. Maybe we are the ones that insisted. Because like you said, in the 1980s is when the movies started coming out, and then they realized, well, we should tell our stories because we have similar stories.
Well, no, in the early 1980s, they had the first gathering of Holocaust survivors in Jerusalem.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
That was the first one.
Very good.
And that was when we were named, you and I. Before that, they didn't name us.
As a 2G.
As a 2G.
Uh-huh.
Right. So that also made me become much more active.
This is very interesting.
Yes. And then they had one in Washington in 83, I think, which I did go to. And my father didn't go to any of them. So I went with other 2Gs.
Right.
So all of those things were happening in the 80s. And then my group decided to partner with Yale University. And we were the first to actually interview survivors.
Wow. No kidding.
Yeah. And it's still in Fortunoff at Yale.
Was this with Sid Mandelbaum?
Yes, with Sid Mandelbaum.
Yeah.
He was the South Shore. We were the North Shore.
Right. How interesting is that?
So,
it's so interesting.
And we went to Yale. They trained us. We wrote our own questions.
Right.
The equipment was like.
And you recorded it.
Yeah, but you can't imagine the equipment in the early in the 80s.
I remember. Yeah.
8 tracks.
Not like today.
No.
Now you have a cell phone that can record probably 10 times better.
So we were one of the first that ever did that.
Yeah, that's a quite incredible story. You made a good point. I think that I think the 2Gs. You kind of said it that the 2Gs actually were more outspoken about the Holocaust than the actual survivors because they had a lot of trauma. It's hard for anybody who's traumatized with PTSD to talk about their pain.
But in the 80s, that's when it really started. People started talking.
It was like 40 years later.
Yeah.
Right? Like 40 years later.
Well, there were a few who spoke earlier, but not most of them spoke.
Most of them did not.
No.
I wonder if they were embarrassed or they were, or they just.
They were. I don't
just
think
move on. Or they wanted to move on.
I'm not sure.
Maybe.
And a lot of Americans weren't ready to hear it.
That's true.
So.
That's true. Do you think that Americans are more ready to hear it now than before?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I even think that the kids now are different than 3 years ago and 5 years ago.
And tell me why.
Because of the world. I think it's because of the world we live in.
Right. You've been through this for so many years. You've seen the ups and downs. You've seen the trends, the changes. So you see, since COVID, you've seen a difference?
I mean, during COVID, we didn't do that much. But,
right. But you said like in the last 3 years.
Yeah, the last few years. And this year, the kids are great. All the kids that are coming, they're
very open to this, right?
Very interested.
I find the same thing.
Very, very interested.
They're curious, they're interested, and they're empathetic.
Very empathetic.
Does that say that maybe it's working? Maybe education is working? I mean, look,
statistics show that those children that are educated in the Holocaust are more empathetic.
Right.
They are kinder, and all of those things.
That's a beautiful thing.
See? That's what the statistics do show.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Because people ask, is it working because there's still anti-Semitism? Well, if we didn't do it, it would be worse, number one. Number two, the kids, the new generation, they're definitely more empathetic. I definitely see that myself.
We're talking about the younger kids. The kids 18 and over are different.
We're not talking about them. We're talking about the 8th graders, 7th graders, right?
fifth graders, seventh graders.
How many tours do you think you've given? Hundreds, thousands, even
A lot.
maybe even thousands.
But we went into schools even before.
Right, I know.
And so,
yeah. and given so,
but I also think the 3Gs had an impact on their grandparents. See, my children didn't have any grandparents, but if they spoke to their grandchildren.
right.
And the 3Gs are extraordinarily active. They have a national organization. Did you know that?
I didn't know it was national. I thought it was local.
It is extraordinarily powerful.
Wow. So every generation seems to be more active than the
previous. They're going into
previous.
schools, and they have all kinds of. They're incredible.
Well, they're carrying the torch.
But it's different. The relationship with a grandchild is very different than a relationship with a child. We lived with our parents.
We did.
We
had front row seats.
Right. So it was different, but they are extraordinarily active.
My dad would wake up in the middle of the night and cry, and I didn't know why, because the things that he went through, and of course he missed his mother and I never had grandparents on my father's side or uncles or aunts, just like you,
Right.
and so my heart breaks for what they went through, not only during the war but after the war. They suffered greatly.
I didn't feel that.
Yeah.
I really didn't.
What did you feel?
For me, I understood what they lost at a later age.
Yeah, me too.
When I was like maybe a teenager.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
My father was 30 in 1940.
Right.
So they had a very different. They had a life before.
Understood.
They had a very they lived a whole life before the Holocaust.
Right.
And they lost a lot of family. Yeah. So my father was one of 12 children.
What? 12 children?
3 survived.
Whoa. That's amazing.
And my mother only had one brother.
Yeah. And where did they live? Where did
Well,
they
my mother's brother went to Palestine early on, and he was an architect. He built most of Har HaKarmel. He was very well known in Israel.
Wow.
My father's family, one survived by going to Paris, his oldest sister, and his brother went to Palestine also, and that's how he survived. The rest of them did not.
They didn't survive.
No.
What a shame. So where do you see the future for the kids today, and where do you see the future for this center, this museum? And there's about 80 centers around the country in the United States that do what we do. Where do you see? Do we pivot at any point, or do we continue talking the same story?
It seems that we do. It seems that there's more need for it now than ever before.
I agree.
Because when you look at things like the Anne Frank exhibit that opened up,
right,
it sold out immediately.
Right,
which is incredible.
Well,
right?
Shocking, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it shows that there's a big demand for this information, not just from children, but also adults.
Right.
They want to know.
Well, that's a good point, because in my opinion, I've done a lot of programs, and I think the adults are more interested even than the children. Mm-hmm. And I've done programs with the adults and the children. Like I've had speakers come where their parents came with the kids, and the kids were interested, but the parents were even more interested. Wow. And then it gave them an opportunity. They were sitting near each other they listened to like Manny Corman, and we've had several of survivors coming to our temple.
Right.
And then they could talk about it with them. Huh. I also think parents today, Jewish parents, are instilling Jewish pride in their children at a rate that is much different than it was.
Yes.
That's because of October 7th.
Yes,
that's
we agree.
That's very clear, very clear. And the children are showing much more Jewish pride, I think.
Yes.
So those are
and rightfully so. Yeah. You've in the center here, you're part of the program for teachers, police cadets, nurses.
I'm part of the program for the police cadets.
For the police cadets
and the nurses.
Tell me about that experience. I really want
It's great.
What kind of reactions do you get? What do you hear from them? What do they say?
I think there are 6 places in the country, or maybe 7 now. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. It started in Washington, and it is a joint program between the museums and the ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Mm-hmm. They play a part in it as well. So no cadet unless or Suffolk County can become a police officer without coming through this building. Every one of them comes through this building.
And what kind of training? Is it tolerance training, or is it about the Holocaust?
It's not about either. It's not about either one of those things.
I have no clue what you do. Tell me what you do.
It's really about what happened to the police in Nazi Germany and how they became politicized and how they became part of the Nazi Party and what happened to them. And so it is not to compare them to them, but because we all have the ability to do bad things.
Yes.
But it's our moral compass that keeps us from doing
Very good.
them.
Yes. Wow.
It's a great it's a fabulous program.
I didn't know actually that's what you talk about. I never thought about that.
It's a very prescribed program.
It just shows how
it's a whole prescribed program.
But the police back then were obedient, right, to that ideology.
Well, yes, because
so you're telling them to think for themselves, and this is a democratic society.
Well, I don't know that that's true, but we know the future. Okay, so in 1933, if all of the civil servants, including police, had to say that they'll play their loyalty to Adolf Hitler, let's say, or to a person instead of a constitution, they didn't know what was going to happen in 1938, 39. It was before.
Right, of course.
So we know what happened. We know history, but they didn't know. They don't know the future.
Right.
So it's a very involved thing, and there's a lot of discussion. But it's a great program.
It's a program that sounds like I'd like to take, quite honestly, because I want to learn about that. That is so interesting.
Program. And then we do the nursing program, but that's somewhat different. We work with nursing students.
You've devoted many years to this. This is all, you don't get paid to do this. You volunteer. No. And I mean, I'm grateful for the years that you put in. And I'm sure a lot of people were impacted. And I'm sure.
I hope so.
Oh, I'm sure. I think it's more than hope. You've touched many lives, thousands of lives.
I hope so.
You did. And that's the fact. And so you made this world a little bit better than when you found it. That's the point here, is that you made the place a little bit better. And for the kids, for the future. And that's really our goal, is to make this place a better place, a more tolerant, more kinder place.
Absolutely. And when the museums opened, it gave people home.
Right.
So it also changed how we did it. It gave people home. It also gave a place where you could learn together and be a family. And it offered a different kind of education. We worked on our own at the beginning, but now there's so many places where you can continually learn. And that's the other thing. I continually learn about all of these things.
Right.
And Holocaust education changed several times. It changed again after October 7th also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and
the survivors, there are more. There are so many survivors now in our center that speak all of a sudden.
Years ago, it was hard to get them to talk, and now we have so many. But there's so many who want to talk, but there's few of them. Right? There's actually fewer and fewer,
but we have a lot now.
We do. I don't even know how it's even possible, but they really are coming out of the woodwork, as they say.
And some of them were very young, so they know what happened through their parents. They don't remember a lot of it as well. So,
Gail, it was great having you here.
Thank you.
On this podcast series, Raised by Survivors. I'm your host, Dr. Bernie Furshpan, here at HMTV. Until next time, stay well.